In laying the foundations for the beginning of the American Revolution, we really need to look at some of the thought processes that were going on and very popular at the time in the colonies and begun to take more of a hold in the minds of your colonial people. The Enlightenment was a major movement at this time period that really stressed the use of reason and scientific method as opposed to strict reliance on religion. So this is going to really be a new thing for people to really rely on themselves and on what they could find out and reason away using their own minds. A lot of it's going to come from one of the major Enlightenment philosophers was John Locke. His theory of human understanding was based on this idea of that all humans are born with a blank slate. That their mind and soul was determined by the sensory experiences of individuals. So meaning that what they took in, what they were exposed to is what is going to completely develop their mind. What they saw, what they felt, how they were treated was going to shape them instead of it being just that it was already born in them. So you see how this could impact the way that people thought about their role in colonial government and in colonial life. The Enlightenment itself is going to lead to a lot of scientific discoveries, again, because people are going to be focusing and relying on their minds and what they can discover. And it also is going to lead to the birth of things like the scientific method, a specific way of discovering information. Benjamin Franklin is a major American scientist during this time period. He comes up with lots of different inventions and does all kinds of testing, even when it comes to religious experiences. He was very well known for going out and conducting experiments. For example, when he listened to George Whitefield, he did not believe that 1,000 people could actually physically hear George Whitefield while he was giving a sermon, and he just thought people were responding to each other. When in fact he goes out to do this and he does like a little scientific experiment. He goes to, just a few feet away from the stage and, notes whether or not he can hear him clearly. And he continues his way back until he gets to the very back and discovers that, yes, in fact, he had the ability to project his voice and that it was, in fact, people responding to his sermon. So even something like that, Benjamin Franklin was always applying that scientific method to it. We also see this is going to increase people's education. People begin going to school and going to school longer for education for various reasons. So this is something that definitely continues and is going to boost the whole idea that people should be educated and begin to think for themselves. Now, John Locke, I already said, was very important. He's going to introduce the idea of natural rights, that all people were born with the natural rights of life, liberty, and property. He believed those were the rights of man. That is going to be key in his whole theory about human nature. He also believed in this idea called a social contract. It was an agreement between a people and their government that basically the people were willing to give up some of their rights in order to be protected by the government. Now, mostly this means protected from physical harm, but it could also mean protection as far as their financial abilities and that kind of thing. So he believed it was a contract. So remember what a contract is. It's an agreement that both parties enter into. So it's not one where one party dominates the other. It is a willing agreement between two individuals or two groups of people. So that's what he believed that a government really was this agreement between two groups. Baron de Montesquieu is going to be another Enlightenment philosopher who is going to present a new idea, and this is going to be separation of powers in government. Separating those powers in government is going to be important because he believed it would keep it from being corrupted. That that absolute power corrupts absolutely, meaning that no one branch of government or person should have all of the power. So you can already see where we are getting some of our ideas about the foundation of our government. The Great Awakening is another source of kind of inspiration for a lot of the thought processes going on at this point in time. The Great Awakening is a revival of the Puritan faith. We call this the Great Awakening or the First Great Awakening because there is a second one that comes along later in the 1800s. But this is a revival of the Puritan faith where you're going to see a lot of emphasis put on personal repentance, and it was all about avoiding hell. So you see this whole idea really stressed about a personal relationship with God, as opposed to other types of other formalities in the Anglican and Catholic churches. Jonathan Edwards is going to be a major minister. He is going to have a very famous sermon called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, where he basically talks about how God is dangling the people over the fiery pits of hell, and they are dangling there by just a little thin thread that he could, in all his great wisdom, just cut that thread very quickly. But in his great mercy, he chooses not to do that. But this whole, George Whitefield is another major minister in the whole Great Awakening during this time period. But again, the whole idea is all about that personal connection is going to be stressed here. We do see more denominations come out of this. We also are going to see it lead to more education, because again, it's that whole idea of we need to be educated so that we can be able to communicate with God personally and read the Bible for ourselves. So this is going to be some of that foundation that's laid at this point. The rate of education in the colonies was actually higher than it was in England. We had a larger percentage of our people here in the colonies going to school for a longer period of time, which is interesting. And most of it, again, was for religious purposes, trying to train our ministers so they would be able to correctly preach the Bible. Universities like Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, and Yale were all established during this time period in the colonies and are still some of our oldest and most prestigious universities in the United States today. Again, remember, the whole purpose of the majority of people who went to school was to educate our ministers.